What rules, procedures, and expectations do you set up at the beginning of the year, and how do you communicate them with your students?
My expectations that I set up are pretty standard for Piscataway High School. I try to make them very high because I believe that all the students can achieve it. They're very, very basic. The key core of what I do is establishing respect. I'm very, very open with my students about what my expectations are. I think communicating everything to the kids is very important, and I think explaining it to them. Most students never really stop to ask why we do things. I encourage them to ask those questions because as they find out more about it, they take more ownership of it, and then it's less about me having to enforce the rules and more of the students kind of enforcing it for themselves. In that sense, behavior and discipline problems decrease pretty dramatically, and we can really focus on moving ahead as a community of scholars, which is good.
Well, my first set of rules always for whatever class I'm teaching, always are centered around respect. As long as the students respect themselves, that's super important for me, and they must respect me, obviously, as their teacher. Besides the school rules, which we absolutely follow, just maintain self-respect.
You've asked a student more than once to get back on task and they refuse. What do you do?
I try first to figure out why doesn't the student want to do that activity. I found that a lot of times it could be something so simple that the student just doesn't understand the directions of the activity. So I make sure that they focus up back on that activity, make sure that they understand what the directions are, and a lot of times they'll get right back to doing what they should be doing. I try to focus on the activity to make sure that that is the most important thing that they're working on. And I don't ever fight with the students and just stay positive.
I would move in their vicinity, maybe put a hand on their shoulder or ask to see them outside. We try to keep it as contained as possible. If it's something, making this, if it's something that's egregious, that's disrupting the entire class, that has to be addressed. But if we are all on page 42 and the student over here is not, try to make it quiet because I have made that mistake in the past. I've been teaching since I did my student teaching in 1992, a long time ago. And I personalized it, like I said to be here, and that doesn't work. And then making it, escalating it. So really trying to keep it as non-confrontational as possible, that it doesn't need to be that. And most times what I have found after so many years, somebody might be tired, something's going on at home, something happened outside of here, and this is not, I don't care what you're saying, this is not about me, and trying to just, what's going on here, is there an issue? It's like trying to communicate with them that way. But definitely not exploding.
How do you react when a student challenges your authority in front of the class?
Well, fortunately, direct challenges to teacher authority are extremely rare. And generally, I believe that's so because we try to set the expectations and roles and responsibilities up front in discussions of what the responsibilities are of students and what the responsibilities are for teachers. But if it does happen, on the rare occasion when it occurs, the key is to not to escalate the situation. To do that, I just really try to emphasize that the student has choices, and that the choices that the student is acting through their behavior really dictate the consequences. So essentially, students are in charge of the consequences that occur through the behavior choices they're making. And then lastly, if physical safety is not an issue, we try to deal with it completely after the class.
One of the things is, first I reflect, maybe it's something I'm doing wrong. Maybe I'm just totally not seeing what's going on in the class, and I'm so focused on my lessons, not realizing that I'm off track. And I'll even apologize. And from there, if it isn't my fault, then I'll ask to talk to the student in private, perhaps out in the hallway, and see exactly what's on their mind, and let them share, and assess it from there.
How do you welcome your students' various cultural backgrounds in the classroom?
Colleagues talk about treating everyone equally. I like to look at it more fair and equal to me are not quite the same thing. Everybody's a little bit different. I try to make adjustments. Again, getting to know the student, especially as the year goes on, makes that a little bit easier. I have one student who tends to doze in class. Turns out he works 40 hours. That's a lot different than somebody being defiant. I know he's got that going on. Doesn't excuse it, but now, I can communicate with him differently, and we have a very good relationship now instead of, me yelling at him, don't sleep in my class. Other students, they have different reasons. Sometimes the reasons aren't very valid. But I try to be as fair as possible, and that means making adjustments.
I mean, the expectation for me is the same for all students. However, there is wiggle room with certain things. So, for example, I'm in the gym. If a kid is fasting, they can't participate, I take that into account. If a student hasn't been able to wash their clothes because they live in an apartment complex, they don't have access to a washing machine inside their house, then I make wiggle room for there. I grew up in an apartment, so I understand you can't just always wash your clothes when you want to sometimes. Some students can't afford gym clothes, so sometimes we've worked to buy them stuff. So you have to look at each kid's situation uniquely and take it from there.
What do you do to make your students feel heard and understood?
I always restate what students say. Like I will say, oh, that's right, what that person said is exactly what we're talking about. So I try to restate, even if it's a day later, I'll be like, yes, remember what so-and-so said yesterday? So I always try to bring up what the student is saying and try to relate it to whatever topic we're on at that moment.
I keep the lines of communication open. Actually, we're communicating throughout the course of the day. I am a believer that you need to create a rapport with students. I'm not going to say a personal level, but they feel like it's personal, so there's a level of comfort and ease, and because of that, you hope they don't want to disappoint you and stuff, and that it matters what you think, and they understand you're not just here to collect a paycheck, that you actually care about their progress or what's going on with them.
How do you encourage participation from students of various cultural backgrounds? How do you encourage participation from students of various cultural backgrounds?
I do so slowly. It goes back to the rule of respect and helping my students feel empowered and like they can take risks in my class. But as with any group of people, you're going to have folks who are ready to jump right in there and participate and be extroverts. But then you're going to have those students who are more introverted or shy or just don't like the spotlight, and their way of participating is through eye contact and through body language and through side conversations or handing in work early. So I try to make sure I have this mindset where I'm allowing for multiple perspectives and points of view and frameworks, because everybody's raised differently, everyone has different cultural values, and so I have to constantly remind myself what looks like classroom participation to one student might be different for another student based on all of the different pieces that make us who we are.
We love all the cultures. Between myself and the chief, we've actually traveled to a ton of different places, and we work that into some of our leadership or some of the other lessons. Because if we know somebody's from a specific area or has a different custom, we have nothing to listen. Okay, this is what we do here. What's the culture in, I'll use India. I didn't realize that the number of states in India, like 200 different dialects and those things. So it's sort of a mutual learning process because we have a great opportunity here because we have so many different cultures. So if yours is different, let us know what you do because it broadens all of our horizons.